2, a 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This is
the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 5th of March, 2018, from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. We roll along here. We always dedicate our shows, the Monday Morning Quarterback, to the late, great Jerry Pippin, our broadcast partner who died in 2015. We're coming upon, I need to check that and see precisely when the anniversary of his death was. It is March, I know that much of it. Nonetheless, we'll start with the teacher strike in the state of West Virginia. We have a press release, and we normally get these from Governor Justice. Mistakes and differences set aside. We've got to get our kids back to school. While everybody is focused on the mistakes, my focus is solely on getting our children back to school, said Governor Jim Justice, after the state Senate on Saturday rejected his proposal to raise pay for teachers, school service personnel, and state police to 5% and reduced it to 4%. Governor Jim Justice says it's time to quit playing political games and get our kids back to school. The wrangling needs to stop right now, Governor Justice said. For crying out loud, we're putting our kids at risk. I will not be a party to pitting our state employees against our teachers. I strongly feel we're blessed to have them both. Governor Justice went on to say education should be the centerpiece, and I have worked tirelessly to get our teachers the 5% raise. In addition, I truly want goodness for all of the state employees and all West Virginians. If revenue continues to improve, I will move quickly, working with the legislature to bring the remaining state workers from 3% to 5% raise levels. But again, the bottom line is we will be able to fill the teachers' classroom vacancies, and we must get our children back to the classroom. That is from Governor Justice, his office on the 3rd of March. Now we'll go to the paper there in West Virginia, the Charleston Gazette-Mail. Unions maul legal action after wrong bill is passed, if you can believe this. This is by Carolee Lammers, a staff writer there. It's 10 hours ago. In Ripley, West Virginia, state education union leaders said Sunday that the union leaders are exploring all avenues, which include a legal action after the state Senate mistakenly passed the wrong public employees pay raise bill Saturday. Dale Lee, the president of the West Virginia Education Association, said during a forum at Ripley High School Sunday that while he can't go into it, union leaders are exploring avenues that they have in this. The Senate Finance Committee took up the pay raise bill that had been previously passed by the House. During the committee meeting on Saturday evening, members reduced the pay increase for teachers, school service workers, state police troopers from 5 to 4%. Later that evening, the Senate mistakenly passed the House version of the bill with the 5% raise as opposed to the 4% version sent to the Senate from the committee. House members wouldn't agree to that change, and both sides appointed 3 members to a conference committee, which is generally the case, which will have to hash out the differences on the bill. The Jackson County Education Association hosted a forum inviting Lee and West Virginia EA Executive Director Dave Haney to answer questions, discuss education issues currently before the legislature. Senate President Mitch Carmichael, whose district includes Jackson County, was invited to attend, according to the news release from the West Virginia Education Association. Carmichael did not attend the forum. He was a no-show. There's lots of anguish here in the community, and he said we are talking to teachers, the community business leaders, and whomever else to explain what happened and what's going on in the process and where we are. More than 100 teachers, service personnel, members of the community came to hear the updates, ask questions, and learn about the next step. School employees from Jackson, Mason, Roanoke, Cassawana, and a few other counties attended the forum. Union leaders said Saturday that the work stoppage will continue indefinitely until the 5% raise bill is passed, and all 55 counties again closed school for Monday due to the work stoppage. So the strike goes on. Many of the speakers expressed a strong distrust of their senators after the what unfolded on Saturday. Lee said several senators approached union leaders telling them they would vote in favor of the 5% raise, who then voted against the bill on the floor. If you can stand up to your word up there, you can't. You don't need to be there, Lee said. Lee and Jackson County Education Association Adina Bonetti encouraged school employees to return to the Capitol on Monday again and urged senators to pass the bill. I know the teachers have gone down in Charleston to low-income housing every day to deliver food. The kids come out to them, and we hug them because we miss them. Teachers are crying. Amazingly, that's amazing, Handy said. That's something that the 19 senators haven't seen or really don't understand. The dedication that teachers and school service personnel have for the children they serve every day and their families they serve. I heard this is from the Charleston Gazette-Mail, a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper. We're appreciative of the article from them here. Scientists running for Congress in 2018. This is out of Austin, Texas. A candidates forum at Garton's, a stone throw from the Texas State Capitol, is organized by 350.org, a liberal group focusing on climate change. We've seen some of that stuff. 8 of 9 Democrats present running for open seats in central Texas congressional districts, 10, 17, 21, 25, and 35. And of course, they support a full ban on fracking. The lone Republican said as much too, but not Joseph Cappers. I'm not. He said taboos to call for a ban on fracking, just to invite back coal. He's an aerospace engineer. Promised on his website he would not pander to any particular group. Absolutely feel that science is under attack. Kupser's, I guess it's Kupser's, K-O-P-S-E-R. His opponent was the opposite of when John F. Kennedy said he wanted us to get to the moon in less than 10 years, the way Trump is going. 10 years we'll be back in caves, no doubt about that. The rising activism among scientists is a turnabout for a group that has traditionally seen politics as grimy, said G. Terry Madonna, a professor of public affairs at Franklin Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Many of these candidates have been recruited by Free 14 Action, a political action committee founded in 2016. The name of the first three digits of pi, 314 Action, describes itself as the vanguard of the pro-science-resistance, a group founded by none other than Ms. Norton here, Shaughnessy Norton. Some 7,000 people have responded to the group's call to run for office. The group also assembled a network of about 400,000 donors eager to support candidates who back science policy. More than 80% of scientists, according to Pew, identify as Democrats or Democrat leaners. They included a stem cell researcher, Hans Kersted, who came to the U.S. as a child. Who to challenge Dina Rockenbacher in California. Mi Tran, a pediatrician who came to the U.S. as a child refugee from Vietnam. So, naming several here, Samuel Temple, a statistician from AT&T, is running in a crowded Republican primary with the same open seat as Kupser, I guess is how you pronounce that. Anyway, he wrote a paper on anxiety. Kupser described the dangers of climate change as a Fred multiplier on his site, advocates for additional government support for clean energy. His position on fracking, however, is evolving based on recent research linking water disposal wells to man-made earthquakes, especially in Oklahoma. We reported on that. Jerry and I did a few years back. And let me finish this up here. Number of scientists, Jerry McNeely, a Democrat, from California, works as an engineer, has a PhD in mathematics. Not a lot of them. A lot of doctors in the Congress, but most of those people are Republicans. On we go. Another threat to the banking system here. 10 years after the financial crisis, the Senate prepares to roll back banking rules known as dodd-frank. Shows a renewal clout of the financial sector. No doubt those lobbyists are all around the place. The court, a new bill exempts 24 financial companies with assets between 50 and 250 billion from high levels of scrutiny by the Fed. That's known as stress testing. Supporters argue the legislation will bring much needed relief to mid-sized and regional banks. They don't have the $50 billion that treat very much larger counterparts on the 2010 Dodd-Frank law. Senate is slated to take up the action. Senator Warren, on the 10th anniversary of the enormous financial crisis, Congress should not be passing laws to roll back regulation of Wall Street banks. That is from Senator Elizabeth Warren of the Commonwealth. Said in the interview, the bill permits 25 of the 40 largest banks in America to escape heightened scrutiny and to be regulated as they were little tiny community banks that have no impact on the economy. Now, this is one of the big problems here. Tester, he's from Montana. He's on the banking committee. One of the new Democrats to sponsor, said banks in his rural area have been going out of business partially because of regulation imposed by Dodd-Frank. The Main Street banks Community banks, credit unions didn't create the crisis, no doubt about that, but they're being used here as a front. Critics dispute these claims that the Democrat Party schism over financial regulations that pit liberals as Warren, top banking committee Sherrod Brown of Ohio against the so-called moderate conservatives, Heidi Camp of North Dakota, Donnelly of Indiana, and Tester. Well, this is one of the big problems you have, and when you start looking at the position of these so-called moderate conservative Democrats, and it's a situation where there's Mike Crapo, a Republican from Idaho, which sponsors this bill. But we seriously asked ourselves, of what use are these people? The coalition supporting the bill also includes Tim Kaine of Virginia. He ran with the Monster Clinton. Mark Warner there, among the leading authors of, who was among the lead author of the dodd-frank legislation, and the Consumer Protection Agency almost voiced concern of over-regulating of small banks. I can understand that, but that's not what this bill is about. The level of Democratic support also guarantees the bill will have the 60 votes needed to pass the Senate, which is unfortunate. The House passed the legislation, repealed large chunks of Dodd-Frank. Some proponents propose bigger remaining changes may be reconciliated in the House and Senate versions. Schumer is just standing there. He's from New York. He's no more than a poster boy for the banks. Financial firms upped their campaign contributions to key Democrats, Donnelly and Tester. They bought them off, as according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Lobbyist efforts ramped up on the debate to credit the National Credit Union Association. That's unfortunate. More than 5,000 credit union advocates, employees, chief executives from every state were there with the yes stickers on, lobbying there. But the credit unions and these banks are really not in line now. That's credit union advocates pitched the bill as a way to rectify Dodd-Frank overreaching. We understand the concerns that banks perpetuate the crash, but those are not credit unions. Well, no doubt about that, but Dodd-Frank did not overreach. That's one of the schemes that they try to bring up there. Now, this is one that's also closing branches in West Virginia. The new measure centers on exemption for 24 financial companies from strict supervision. That's by the Federal Reserve. It would lift the limited assets for scrutiny from $50 billion to $250 billion, at least temporarily. Scrutiny on banks such as SunTrust. Fewer than 10 banks, U.S. banks, have more than $50 billion assets, although the Fed would reserve the right to apply stricter scrutiny to small banks if felt it's justified. Critics, and see, this is how they spin it. Critics, the advocates of deregulation, are guilty of overly short memories and a false sense of security. There has not been a banking crisis since the Dodd-Frank law. That's very important there. Named from former Senator Chris Dodd. He was from Connecticut, and Bonnie Frank from the Commonwealth. And was passed on a party line vote in 2010 after the Depression. The law is a response to the Depression that almost took out Bank of America and Goldman Sachs, who are back. G.W. Bush is forced to almost $700 billion rescue package, almost $1 trillion. It was that before it was finished up. The law, which tightened supervision of large financial companies, made it harder for banks to do exotic-type things. The law also created a system to wind down large failing institutions. What will happen there, I have no idea. Supporters say the bill includes a number of new consumer protections, including a one-year fraud alert in consumer files, provisions aimed at protecting veteran strength. Opponents point to weakening of the stress test requirement. We talked about that. And elimination of some homeowner protection include blocking of homeowners from going to court to prevent wrongful foreclosures. Now, these are some things that have to be understood here and have to be brought out on the foreclosures. And it's one of the unfortunate things. We have not heard very much about that. Frank, whose signature law is partially dismantled by Crapo's bill, opposes the new legislation, but he said it would be in touch with senators on both sides to leave the major protections in place. He and others angered over years that dodd-frank argued, adjusted as much as the signature law of the Affordable Care Act. And he goes on to say, Frank said he'd rather see Heidekamp and Tester and Donnelly vote for the legislation and get reelected. This is where the big argument always is. How useful these legislators are. There's 3 of them there. There's 3 votes in the Senate. But it depends on how they vote most of the time. Democrats have been lured in supporting bank-friendly laws in the past, only to regret it years later. And we remember Graham Lynch Bailey Act, that's of 1999. It was supported by 138 House Democrats, signed into law by Wild Bill Clinton. The law allowed commercial banks and investment banks to merge. And it almost brought down the country into a gigantic depression, the financial crisis, by creating wobbly behemoths as Citigroup. Clinton signed the Commodities Future Modernization Act, a law that led to rapid expansion of certain complex financial instruments, derivatives, we think at heart there. So those are some of the big problems here. We're looking at Cactus, Texas here, a small community. ICE, the packing company there, several things. Operation Wagon Train hit Swipping Company. That was in 2006, over 10 years ago, but it's now owned by JBS, a Brazilian conglomerate, now owns a plant. They've raised wages there by 25%. They still have mostly workers from outside the U.S., refugee camps in Thailand, Malaysia, truckers from the Sudan, tall and strong, specializing in separating spinal cords. Somalis were there at one time. At one point, the 5th highest per capita Muslim population in the U.S. But the Somalis beat it to Minnesota, where their comrades were. And this is from the Washington Post here. Anyway, Trump is first time in decade to seek to restrict legal immigration. That's what it's all been about, forcing them to raise wages. We talked about this on Numbers Man. The hot economy versus the cold approach. People centered on Arthur Occam, the late Arthur Occam. An economist, the idea of running an economy hot does provide some of the benefits, but however, though, in the 70s, the paper was in 1963. We invite you to check out and tune in to a Numbers Man on the Boston Red Network. So this is Deep Red Moore County, where 75% voted for DJ Trump. And some people there, a meatpacking plant, they blame for crime, drugs, and civic decline. Well, some of those cities used to be almost 100% European. Workers who hung on at the unionized plant earn about $17 an hour in additional health care benefits, free language classes. Cactus is not always a melting pot of harmony. Workers of different ethnic groups and languages struggle to communicate. Well, that's one thing to remember. There's relative prosperity here, too, especially in nearby Dumas. That's 13 miles south and a comfortable distance from the foul odor of the plant. Fast food restaurants like Dumas' main drag and the only Walmart for miles. Anyway. So the plant has the workers. Dumas has whatever Dumas has. We really don't see Americans in these jobs. That is working at the packing plant. Very, very few are there. Trouble fitting jobs. The Trump administration, this is back to our presentation on Numbers Man, is putting its economic theories to test, tightening immigration, a time of low unemployment. The number of refugees admitted into the U.S. has dropped by about 70% since D.J. Trump took office. This administration is phasing out provisional residency permits for more than 250,000 Haitians. So they will be going bye-bye. The meatpacking industry was in a labor squeeze before the measure opening there. U.S. sales approaching $100 billion. There are many of the industry's processing plants are located in remote or rural areas of Midwest states where employers nearly in every industry are struggling to find workers. That's especially in places like Iowa. Immigrants have been butchering, back to the Germans, the Irish, East Europeans, Poles in Chicago's stockyards, which they're not there now. Remain, wages in the meatpacking industry increased with unionization remain relatively high to other manufacturing jobs between the 30s and the 70s when the bottom fell out. Cactus used to be a nice community. That is from Paula Gibson, whose family came to Moore County in the 19th century. Fought in the Comanches, supposedly. Anyway, nonetheless, Gibson's husband Lee returned to Moore County in the late 70s after studying at West Texas A&M University. Over the years, they integrated their family farm and ranch into the global economy and manure composting business using techniques that one of them picked up at college. Thieves broke into the Gibson ranch house last month, stealing a gun and more than $100,000 in family jewelry. I'd wonder why they would keep that amount of money there. Her grandmother's ring, the adult sons help run the farm and ranch today. They're having a problem attracting workers also, like the packing company. The son, 36, words that his son would not get a proper education because the teachers in that area are teaching to the test. Well, that's something that has happened all over the place. And they list in the article, Laotian arrested for fish netting, something common there. And the 64 Bernese showed up from Dallas when they got in trouble for tearing out the carpet in their apartment to cook on the floor. Oh, well. So these are some of the pitfalls there, but they continue on. This Coben voted for Trump, but he doesn't agree with the president when he says the country needs a merit-based immigration system favoring those with advanced skills. This is a little bit different than the theory put forth. We were talking about there in the so-called hot economy idea, a little different idea there. The whole idea was that jobs, lower skill jobs, would evolve into higher paid jobs. That's the idea by running the economy hot. Of course, on the other side, looking at it dialectically, you can run into inflation and other kinds of problems. Now, this was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But the economy has drastically changed, as is the situation here. You didn't have Laotians, Burmese, and those people around at that time. So it was a totally different thing. Let me just don't have a lot of time here, but this is part of some more legislation. Congress moves to drop tariffs on some U.S. firms. Foully, Michael Klomeyer was hiring. His family-owned travel goods business was planning to make new products, bring in 30, this is in Naples, Florida, additional workers. They do handbags there. Temporary reduce, eliminate protection tariffs on 1,662 products, including the type of bags that Klomeyer has planned to produce. The bill would cut costs for rivals who make their bags in low-cost countries like China. So that's the flip to it. There's always a flip side to many, many things. Under the latest rule set in 2016, companies seeking lower tariffs submit an application to the International Trade Commission, then works with the Department of Commerce to determine whether any of the items are made domestically, etc., etc. We glad we caught wind of it, I guess he says here. Because if he didn't catch wind, he would have caught something. So several companies told Reuters that was receptive to their concerns, and I'm glad we got wind of it when we did. So anyway, this is the flip side of it. Let's do sports here. Starting with the National Basketball Association. The Suns were at the Hornets. 115 to 112. Very close game there. Wait a minute. Just a minute here. We're at the Hawks. Sorry about that, in Atlanta. The Hornets were at the Raptors in Toronto. Raptors 103 to 98. The Pelicans were in Washington. Wait a minute here. The Pacers, I'm sorry. The Pacers were in Washington 98 to 95 with the Wizards. The Pelicans were in Dallas, 126 for the Pelicans of New Orleans, and 109 for the Mavericks. Mr. Cuban's not very happy there. The 76ers were in Milwaukee. Bucks 118 to 110 for the 76ers. The Nets were in Los Angeles. Clippers 103 to 120. And finally, the Knicks were at the Kings. Kings 102 to 99 for the Knickerbockers. On to Major League Baseball. We tuned into a Cubs game yesterday. The Orioles 10 to 8 over the Red Sox. This is spring training, remember. The Pirates and Twins. Pirates 9 to 3. The Rangers and the Yankees. Rays and Yankees. Sorry about that. 9 to 1. Rays over the Yankees. The Marlins and the Atlanta team. Have to watch that name because they have that profanity here. Anyway, 5 to 2 was the score. Atlanta. The Tigers and Nationals. Nationals 6 to 2. The Blue Jays and Phillies. Phillies 4 to 2. Astros and Cardinals. Astros 4 to 1. Back to the winning ways. The world champions. The Nationals and Mets. Nationals 7 to 3. Padres and White Sox. Padres 7 to 6. Cleveland and the Brewers. Cleveland 6 to 2. The Mariners and the Rangers. Finally got that one right. Mariners 10 to 7. The Royals and Reds. Listen to the Reds and Cubs. Cubs on that game. Anyway, nonetheless, the Royals 10 to 3. The LA Dodgers. Let me get in my screen up here. And the Giants. I thought it was going to be a good game, but it wasn't even close. Dodgers 9 to 3. They had 15 hits, no errors. And the Giants 7 hits and 2 errors. The Rockies and the Angels. Angels 7 to 6 in that contest. The Athletics of Oakland and the Padres. Athletics 12 to 4. Yeah, we'll see how some of these teams shape up here. And finally, the Cubs and D-backs. It was all D-backs. Cubs got shot out 2-0. D-backs had 6 hits, 1 error, and the Cubs 2 hits and 1 error. And so it goes. The loss, he went to John Lester. We got a little late. Lester, I guess, was all gone. T. Walker was the winner. And Mr. Buchanan got the save. On to college basketball. Number 15, Michigan State, and number 8, Purdue. It was all Michigan, I'm sorry. 75-66. And number 10, Cincy, and number 11, Wichita State. 1 point game there. Cincinnati 62-61 over Wichita State. UConn and number 20, Houston 81-71. 10-point game there. As we move ever close to March Madness. The Flyers and the Panthers. Panthers 4-1 over the Flyers. The Predators and the Avalanche. Predators are 4-3. The Predators of Nashville. The Avalanche of Colorado. They do have Avalanches there at least. The Blackhawks and the Ducks. Ducks 6-3 over the Blackhawks of Chicago. The Anaheim Ducks. And the Golden Knights of Vegas and the Devils. Golden Knights 3-2. And the Devils of New Jersey. The Jets and Hurricanes. Jets 3-2 in that contest. The Red Wings and wow 4-1. Blue Jackets and Sharks. San Jose Sharks and the Blue Jackets. 4-2 Blue Jackets. So Columbus. I had to figure out where they were. This will do it for us. We invite you to tune in to Numbers Man, where we'll talk more about the high-pressure economy. And I think high-pressure economy, this is Arthur Occam. He was Brookings Institute in 1973. Anyway, nonetheless, the high-pressure versus low-pressure economy, high-pressure and low-pressure operations there. Some people talk about the low-pressure. The high-pressure economy is basically at 4% unemployment, and the low pressure at 5%. We're about 4.1 now. So this is applicable, we'll say that. So go over and check out This Week in Economics, and you'll find out all about it. Incidentally, we did append this paper by Arthur Occam, one of our favorites there. Generally, high-pressure applicants concede that with existing labor market institutions, unemployment rates below 4% would be associated with unacceptable inflation. While most low-pressure applicants agree that unemployment rates above 5% are intolerable. Well, not exactly. In the days of G.W. Bush, that was before the Depression, we looked at 4.5% to 5%, even 5.5%. As pretty much full employment. Definitely 4.5% to 5% were full employment. And remember, this paper was written in 1973. This will do it for us. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Good day, as Paul Harvey would say.